morning, everyone, and welcome to the Sunrise Safari. For those of you who don't know, my name is Jamie, and I have Wium, the wildebeest, on camera with me this morning. And we have Tara and Lou in FC helping us out with everything, and of course Eugene helping us with all of our technicalities. And the weather this morning is probably the warmest I've been since I started working for WildEarth. It's around 17 degrees centigrade, which is 63 degrees Fahrenheit, so really nice and warm. I'm actually regretting having my jacket on, although I'm sure that's going to be a sensible decision when we start driving. And for those of you who are joining us for the first time, this is a live safari. So everything that you're seeing on your screens is happening right here in the Sabi Sands on Djuma Game Reserve and Arathusa Game Reserves, just our little portion of the Sabi Sands. And it is also interactive, so if you have any questions or anything that you'd like to comment on, you can do so on #SafariLive on Twitter, or you can email through to questions@wildearth.tv. Now, we have things to find as pretty as this particular sunrise is, and I'll explain as we go along, because we've got quite a bit of distance that we need to cover. Just sitting in a nice open spot of quarantine clearings, but I want to make my way towards Gowrie Gate and then onto the Triple M boundary. And I know that lots of you who are regular viewers of some of the dam cameras are hearing lions calling at the Arathusa dam camera. And the reason is that I'm not rushing straight there is apparently there was some more conflict last night. Now, many of you have been very concerned, as we all have, about the death of another Nkuhuma lioness, seems like one of the sub-adults on Simbambili. Now, I want to head across and just see what happens, because one of the rangers there said that he heard a scuffle between the Nkuhumas and the Birmingham lions around 10 o'clock last night, and they actually chased two of the females through his garden. I'm very interested to see what happened. Obviously, we're all hoping that they are all safe and sound, all members of the Nkuhuma Pride. Unfortunately, Simbambili is just outside of our boundary, so I'm just going to patrol around the edges, see if I can get any of the updates from some of the other guides. Had an update from Mavis and one of the zoomies that they think they saw a leopard moving around very close to the lodge and in the direction possibly of Boyatela access. Now, I'm just about to go onto Boyatela access right now, so I will have a look for any tracks there. Let's see what we can find. Now, just to give some, if there are any new viewers watching, just to give you a little bit of an update, because I'm talking about Nkuhuma prides and Birmingham males, and you might not necessarily be too clued up about what I'm talking about if you've just joined us. So, over the last few weeks, basically since I started working at WildEarth, there were a pride of, or a coalition of 5 young male lions, probably around the region of 4 to 5 years old. One of them is slightly older. They pushed into the territory that was previously held by 2 very large Matimba male lions, and they've actually been causing quite a lot of havoc. They killed a couple of the cubs from one of the Styx Pride females, as well as a couple of the lionesses from the Nkuhuma prides. These were both prides that were previously looked after by the Matimba male lions. And this is normal behavior, but it is very difficult for us all, especially because as we've worked so closely and you've all been watching these characters, it's obviously incredibly sad when something like this does happen. It's not unusual, it's not unheard of lion behavior. It is all part of the territorial takeover process, but it might take a little while for everything to settle down. Checking to see if I spot any leopard tracks from our Siberia Zoomy update. I am on Voyatella access at the moment. Now, apparently the leopard was very close to the lodges that are just by the Djuma Dam camera. I haven't seen anything just yet. It is quite... Still, just after the rains, it's still a little bit tricky to see any tracks on some of the harder soils. The one nice thing about having a leopard crossing around Djuma Dam is that there are guests currently staying at Voyatella camp, so there will be guides driving around that area. Hopefully they can keep us updated on what they find. I do just want to head across in the direction of those lions and see what's happening there.
Morning, mobile station. Reading update.
Sorry guys, the Game Drive channel's just started coming through. And this morning Brent is also out and about. He's going to be doing a bushwalk along with Stef, and I think it's Bryan on camera with them. To hop onto the Game Drive channel just to let them know that I'm on my way up. Brent for Jamie. Now, just to let you know, I'm making my way up Voyatella access now. I'll let you know if I find anything, and then, cross through to Arathusa. Just making sure that we coordinate our efforts in finding these lions if they have crossed into Djuma. Now, we've been talking a little bit about the lions and the pride takeovers, and there's a little bit of concern as to what's been happening, and there's quite a bit of confusion as well. Of course, being free-roaming animals, they don't always do things in places that we can go and see and find out the full story, and often most of the action happens at night. Now, I know that Kerry was wondering about exactly how many Pride members or lionesses have been killed and how many there were originally. So, good morning, welcome to the Sunrise Safari. I'm going to start with the Nkuhumas because those are the ones that we are most certain about. Now, just before, or a couple of months before I started working at WildEarth, or for WildEarth, there were apparently 9 members of the Nkuhuma Pride. So one sub-adult male, whose name is Junior, he's still around, and then a couple of females and 2 sub-adult females. And one of them was killed in February, and I think it was by the Birmingham Boys. It is obviously before my time, but after that, that's when stuff really kicked off. So just as I started working here in July, the Birmingham Boys moved into Djuma, and then across east to Torchwood, where they killed another one of the Nkuhumas lionesses. And then over the last 2 weeks or so, they've killed, I think, both of the sub-adult females. The most recent death was yesterday sometime, probably about 2 nights ago in the early morning, and that was on Simbambili. So the Nkuhumas Pride now stands, as far as I know, on last update, at around 5 members. One of them is junior, the rest are adult females. With respect to the Styx Pride, now the Styx Pride was a little bit confusing because there were a couple of breakaway sections of that pride. There were 2 females, one of which was the mother of 3 young cubs, and then there was another group that moved around, which I think was somewhere in the region of 4 individuals. And very sadly, about a month ago, the Birmingham Boys came in as the Styx mother was trying to collect her cubs, and he actually killed 2 of the cubs. There was one remaining male who managed to escape with his mother. Apparently she fought very, very bravely to try and protect her family. And unfortunately she didn't manage to save 2 of them, but the little because the Matimba males, it seems as though they've gone all the way south towards Londolozi. So they have definitely decided that the Birmingham Boys are not a challenge that they are up to meeting. And unfortunately that's understandable. Both Hairy Belly and the Ginger Male, the 2 big male lions that used to control this area, they are somewhere in the region, one of them is somewhere in the region of 11 years old, so just getting past their prime in terms of being able to fight off, and they just probably wouldn't have, especially if they were separate from each other, wouldn't have the ability to fend off 5 young competitors. It doesn't help matters that the ginger male has quite a serious injury to his paw, which he has had for years, but it comes and goes, and it's been last time I saw him it did look particularly uncomfortable. He was limping quite badly. So they've moved off, and now what's happening with the Styx females, I believe 2 of them were killed. I know of at least 1. And there was some confusion as to whether or not one of them was killed by the Matimba males or by the Birmingham Boys. And I'm not going to be able to give you any clarification on that just yet. I'm still waiting to hear. As I said, a lot of this happens in the middle of the night or very early in the morning, and it can be a little bit difficult to know exactly what happened. And the Birmingham Boys have sort of separating, coming back together, separating, moving into different areas, and really just pushing to see how much territory they can acquire. I'm not seeing any tracks coming through. How nice! Triple M has been graded after the rains, which will help tremendously with any bumps that we have. It will also help us in our search for tracks. It's nice and pristine looking. So this is one of the main access thoroughfares to quite a few lodges in the south, which means that it has a lot of traffic that comes through, and that in turn creates little bumps in the road that then make for a rather jiggly experience while you're driving. I'm just going to switch radio channels, see if we can get any updates from the western side of the property. to have to wait until I'm a little bit closer to Arathusa before I'll be able to hear them. At the moment I've just got static. We'll try for radio comms a bit closer. Sorry? Oh, the shoot's coming through. Oh, that's amazing. Let me go back a little bit. Is that good? Now, Wium's just pointed out something very, very exciting. There we can just start to see already, only 3 or so days after our big first rains, just those little bits of green coming through. And in about a week's time, this place will have transformed. It's been very dry and dusty and rather brown looking. So it's really, really exciting to see the new shoots starting to come through. And it's exciting for us, of course, but it's also incredibly exciting for some of the grazers who now have a little bit more option in terms of the food that they can consume. So really nice to see the first signs of spring. We don't really have spring here. It kind of goes from winter to summer very, very quickly. And it's already warming up now, even though it's 7:15 in the morning. 6:15, sorry. It's already starting to get warm. And very soon it's going to be hard to imagine that we were ever cold. There we go, a bit of radio comms coming through. Okay, nothing just yet. Now, so far there have been no tracks coming out of Simbambili towards the gate. I haven't picked up on anything. Could well be that the Nkuhumas fled in a different direction, possibly towards Elephant Plains. Very important to remember, although it is incredibly hard to watch the deaths of these lionesses and the cubs that have been caused by the Birmingham Boys, it's important not to vilify either groups, either the Matimba males or the Birmingham Boys. These are wild animals and it is all part of a natural process, as hard as that process is to watch. And personally, I'm actually very saddened by the fact that those 2 sub-adult females from the Nkuhuma pride were killed. I was lucky enough to see them playing around a buffalo carcass about a month ago. They were hiding and pouncing on each other. So it is very, very distressing, but it's all part of the natural process of the takeover. have been lots of comparisons being made about the Birmingham Boys seeming to be following in the footsteps of the Mpoho males, including a comment by Maggie that they do seem to be imitating the reign of the Mpohos. Now, for those of you who don't know, the Mpohos were an infamous coalition of 6 male lions that moved together and dominated a huge area of the Sabi Sands. I think somewhere from the region of 2008 to 2011 or so. And they were infamous for the impact that they had on the lion dynamics in the Sabi Sands. There were some numbers that I heard they were responsible for killing well over 100 different lions, including many, many cubs and a couple of females as well. And that reign was eventually brought to an end by the Mjingi male lions, or the Mjingalanis, who moved in. And it does seem to all be part of that natural process, and it could well be that we see a very, very similar thing with the Birmingham males, because there are 5 of them, and they are very large males for their age. They are going to start creating quite a chaotic situation around here. And I think we could probably say, or possibly predict, that once they do establish their core territory, which they are in the process of doing, there could even be a split in the same way that the Mpohos, where Kinky Tail and Mr. T moved into the sort of eastern section of the Mpoho territory, and the other 4 stayed to the west. And the Matimba males will have a very hard time of things. They've moved down south, as I mentioned before, towards the Sand River. But there are plenty of male coalitions down in that area as well. There's the Four Ways Coalition, which is dominant to the south, and then the Mjingis, who are still moving around to the north of them. So they've pushed into a little patch, and it could well be that they're going to start to become quite nomadic in their movements and move around a great deal. Very difficult to watch and see in terms of the impact that it has on the lions. I mentioned that it is a natural process. And Betty Lou, good morning, welcome to the Sunrise Safari. You were wondering why it's necessary for the males to change territories at all, or establish territories. And it's all part of the natural process, and most importantly, the impact that it has is to keep the genetic lines fresh. So a male lion typically will be able to move into an area at around and start to dominate and mate with females at around 6 to 7 years old, and you'll spend the next 3 or 4 years dominating those prides in the area and mating with them and producing offspring. After that time, if they go unchecked, there is a distinct possibility, because lions are not particularly picky, that they could start to breed with their daughters and their granddaughters, which is obviously a situation that you really, really want to avoid. And the lions have evolved their own way of keeping their genetic lines fresh, which is the males from prides will disperse at about 3 or 4 years old, and they will either stay together with their brothers, or they will form coalitions with other unrelated males. That's also a very common situation. And because obviously the more male lions there are, the better your chances of establishing a territory. And they will go off in search of pastures new. And unfortunately, that is usually accompanied by either the deaths of other dominant pride males or the cubs that the other males have fathered. And that's because the main aim of a male lion is to propagate his genetics over anything else. So they will target and kill the cubs of other males so that they can take the chance and start mate, or bring the females back into estrus and start mating and passing on their own genetic line. What is interesting, just to throw an extra spanner and complication in the works, is that there are lots of nomadic males who sort of move around the edges of territories. There will always be an overlap of territories, and female lions are quite clever in the way that they approach things. So although they will mate with their dominant pride males, if they come into estrus and there's no pride male around, they will sneak in a mating session with another male, an unknown male to that pride. And that's a very clever system, because it's a way of not ensuring, but at least increasing the chances of that cub's survival. Because then the males will know which females they've mated with, and could well think about, or might be fooled into thinking that the cubs that she's produced are their own. It's a clever system. It's one that female leopards have also adopted. They will try and mate with several males at a time. Now that I'm a little bit further into Arathusa, I just want to get onto the Game Drive channel and see if I can get any updates. I'm making my way towards the dam where there was audio of those lions. Morning stations, Jamie, WildEarth. Are there any updates from this side? Okay, we'll try that again a little bit later. There's still some groundwater around as well. The nice thing about a male coalition like the Birmingham Boys is that with 5 male lions moving together, if those were the lions responsible for the calls that were heard on the dam camera, 5 male lions are actually, it's fairly difficult to miss their tracks on a road, and they will generally use the roads. They're nice and quiet, it's an easy way of walking. So lions and other predators very often utilize these pathways. And with 5 male lions walking together, you've got a very good chance of seeing their tracks. Now, on the subject of the fact that there are 5 of them, Gary wanted to know if it's numbers or strength that's most important in terms of a pride takeover, and whether there are too few Matimbas to compete. And it's definitely a combination of the two. So in this case, the fact that there are 5 of them confers an enormous advantage to them. And that makes perfect sense. There are only 2 Matimba males in the south. Now the Matimba male coalition was a little bit bigger. It was originally 6 male lions who moved around the Manuleti, and then that coalition split off slightly. So 3 of them stayed up in the north around Manuleti, and the other 2 moved south, and those are the 2 that we saw on a regular basis, the ginger male and hairy belly. And then the sixth one actually moved into the Kruger Park, apparently. So they did split up, and it's not uncommon for coalitions to split. But it is very difficult for them then to reunite, especially because now, at this point, the southern Matimbas are separated by another male coalition from the northern Matimbas. So it's going to be very difficult for them as two male lions who are a little bit older, a little bit past their prime, to compete against 5 young boys. But that's being said, if they were to catch, because the Birmingham Boys have been moving around and about on their own, if they were to catch one of the Birmingham Boys on their own, they would still be capable of inflicting very serious damage and possibly even killing them. So you can't discount experience in this process as well. About these live safaris is that you actually have an opportunity to follow the stories of the animals for weeks and months and years at a time. And Emily was wondering if or which lions were seen mating in the middle of the road a couple of weeks ago. And that was seen by a couple, I think James, Brent and myself all had an opportunity to sit with those lions while they were mating throughout the week. And that was Hairy Belly and one of the females from the Styx Pride. So this was just before the Birmingham takeover really kicked off. In fact, it was almost exactly at the same time. So Hairy Belly was distracted, mating with a Styx female. The ginger male was off to the further south with his limp. And it was exactly around that time that the Birmingham Boys started moving in. And we were lucky enough to be there for the initial confrontation, or one of the initial confrontations, which consisted of a lot of calling and a lot of backwards and forwards moving. So the Birminghams went south across Gowrie Main, across our southern border, were met by the calls of the Matimba males and turned around and ran back into Djuma. So initially actually chased off by the show of strength from the Matimbas. Interesting observation. This is the first time I think I've been into Arathusa since the rain, and it's amazing how much more soggy the ground is here compared to Djuma, even a couple of days after the rain. And the reason behind that is Arathusa is actually an enormous seep line. It's almost one big seep line. So essentially the bedrock, the rock right at the bottom, is fairly solid and almost impermeable to water, which means that as there's runoff coming down a gradient, it gets pushed to the surface and creates these rather soggy situations. I've seen are hyena tracks on the road. But we are getting much closer to Arathusa Dam now, where we had that update from various viewers about the fact that they heard lions roaring. Now Mavis tells me that she also heard a leopard sawing at the on the camera, and was wondering why a leopard would make that loud sawing noise when the lions were roaring so close. And surely it would make more sense for that leopard to be nice and quiet, just to protect itself. And the one thing about the lions roaring as they do, which is one of the most important reasons as to why they do it, is because they are announcing exactly where they are. So the leopard actually can feel a lot more comfortable knowing that there are lions in that area, and it knows exactly where they are. So it can actually take that opportunity to call without worrying about attracting attention. And generally, I have never yet seen a lion respond to a leopard call. So they will go after them, and it's not unheard of for them to try and kill a leopard. But in my years of experience, I've never seen a lion target a leopard that is territorial calling. This morning. Here we go, just approaching the lodge. The difficulty, of course, with hearing the audio of the lions but not being able to see them is that we don't know exactly how far away they were or which direction the sound was coming from. Whereas if they'd actually come to the dam, we would have had a starting point to track them. But of course, it's very, very difficult to determine direction if all you're getting is the lions calling. Road junctions very, very carefully. Because we know that the Birmingham Boys, we know that the Birmingham Boys were to the north of us, but we know that they were calling somewhere around this dam. So my plan was to approach from here and start working my way north and see if we can pick up on exactly where they were calling from. wanted to take this opportunity while we are here to stop and listen and see if we can hear any more audio. This is Arathusa Lodge, for those of you who might be joining us for the first time. We're just at the dam outside the lodge. And this is where there were reports of those lions calling. There is a 24-hour camera up here. Oh, Egyptian geese. Oh! Little bit of conflict there between the Egyptian geese. I think nothing too serious, just a little early morning scuffle. And of course, it is breeding season for a lot of the birds here. So we've seen plenty of conflict, including that incredible fight between the two male drongos that we saw yesterday. And it looks as though the water level actually hasn't changed that much since the first rains that we had. It was about 30 millimeters worth of rain that we had. I'm not sure how much they had here on Arathusa. Obviously it differs between areas and can often differ up to 10 millimeters from one place 5 kilometers away. But the water levels haven't gone up too much just yet. The hippos seem to be happy though. It's going to take a couple of more big rains before it really starts to have an impact. Got a couple of hippos there. Looks like he's covered in a waterweed blanket. And it looks as though just behind them there is an African jacana just above their heads. I'm going to grab my binoculars to double check that. But that russet colour and sitting on the water weeds makes it fairly distinctive. Really cool little birds. One of the few where the female actually will mate with a male, lay eggs, and then disappear off to mate with another male. Very, very unusual in bird species. And the male actually then becomes solely responsible for raising the chicks. It is indeed an African jacana. And they've got wonderfully big feet, which allow them to stand on those water weeds and spread out their weight nice and evenly, so that they don't fall or push down into the water. Now it does sound as though on the radio that the guys have located the Birmingham Boys, so I just want to call in and see now if I can get a clearer update on exactly where that sighting is. Just bear with me for one moment. I'm going to start heading across in the direction that I think it's in. We'll leave the dam for now, as peaceful a setting as it has been. Stations Jamie WildEarth. I'm going to try again for an update now that I'm further into Arathusa. sorry, copy 1 out of 5. I'll try getting him a bit later. At the moment, I'm struggling to hear clearly where that Birmingham Boys sighting is. So I'm making my way towards the western boundary, and I'm going to move my way north. See if I can figure it out from there. There's lots and lots of fresh tire tracks of Arathusa vehicles on this road. So I'm going to do a little bit of detective work in the absence of lion tracks. Now, obviously, I really want to get to this Birmingham Boys sighting so that I can have an update and see what they're looking like and what sort of condition they're in at the moment. But I'm also keen to have a chance to chat to some of the other guides, especially those of them who work on Simbambili and might have a bit more information for us about what happened to the Nkuhuma pride. Now, I know that a lot of people are very concerned about Junior's future. Now, Junior is the sub-adult male who's with the Nkuhuma pride. He's actually almost adult age, and he will have to start moving about on his own. He's around 3 years old, and his father is one of the Matimba males. Very good-looking young boy. But when he does head off and disperse, he's going to have to make it on his own. And David was wondering if there were any sub-adults or any other males around his age that he could maybe hook up with and form a coalition with, because his chances of survival when he's on his own are actually very slim. And David, there aren't, as far as I know, in the area that the Nkuhumas move around in, but I haven't seen some of the other prides, so it could well be that there are sub-adults that are of Junior's age in, say, the Ottawa pride, or some of the prides that are further to the south of us, or even up into the north towards Manyaleti. And there is even a chance, and I know it's a difficult one to determine exactly what they're going to do, and you can never really predict animal behavior, but there is a chance. Now, when the Birmingham Boys came in and chased the Nkuhumas off that buffalo kill that was on Vulture's, or just off Vulture's Nest Road a couple of weeks ago, Junior actually came back and lay down probably about 100 meters from them, and they all seemed fairly relaxed in his or with each other's presence. Now, it's not unheard of for coalitions to adopt another male member who is not related to them. There is a chance, it is a slim chance because there is an age difference, but if Junior plays his cards right, he might stand a chance of being allowed to join the Birmingham coalition. I think it's unlikely, but I'm raising it as a possibility. There is an interesting irony in the fact that the Birmingham males came from the Birmingham pride and were actually chased out of the area that they were in when they were a little bit younger by the Northern Matimba coalition. So it's an interesting turn of the circle, turn of the wheel out here. earlier when we were sitting at the Arathusa Dam, we saw those hippos enjoying themselves quite quietly, wrapped in their blanket of water weeds. And apparently there's been a lot of comments about the fact that they have been very noisy at night, making lots of grunts and calls, and then go to sleep during the day. And of course, hippos are nocturnal, so they do most of their moving around at night. They will sometimes move during the day, but it is usually on cloudy, overcast days. And those calls and grunts are a combination of sort of contact calls between pod members or raft members, as well as for the territorial dominant males, a way of establishing the hierarchy and making sure that everybody knows that they are the main bulls in that area. And the nice thing about the extra rain is that it does take the pressure off the hippos a little bit. So as space gets a bit restricted, things start to get a little bit tetchy, they get a bit more aggressive, and there's often serious fights over space. But now, with the rains coming, hopefully, they will have a little bit more of a pleasant dam environment to inhabit. I'm sure that many of you who are regular viewers of the dam cameras will have seen the hippos heading out on their nocturnal ramblings. So coming out of the dam and heading off to find grazing pastures. And you would be absolutely astounded to see how far they move. It's such a pity that we don't get to see them except really during the day or late or in the early evening. But they can move 10 kilometers in a night and wander around, move not just away from their dam, but possibly even move between dams, especially in summer when there's a lot more water around. It gives them just that extra piece or extra bit of flexibility in terms of their movements. It's always such a treat to see a hippo out of the water. They do look incredibly lumbering and like they wouldn't be capable of reaching any kind of speed. But I've seen a hippo run. They can definitely outrun any person that I know. And they're also phenomenally agile. You see hippo tracks coming up and down into rivers and dams on paths that we would struggle to traverse. Most of the vehicle tracks are crossing into elephant plains. As soon as I've got the radio a little bit clearer, I'm going to ask again for the update on that sighting. I'm actually trying to see okay, things are a little bit clearer. Let me try again. toJamie. Good morning, Sean. I was just wondering where that Birmingham sighting is. Copy that, thank you. Copy that, thank you. I'll follow up from there. Okay, now that I've finally been able to get an update from Sean, who is one of the Arathusa guides, the Birmingham Boys are unfortunately quite deep into Elephant Plains, which is across our boundary, so we can't actually go to that sighting at the moment. They're lying down there. I will find out what kind of condition they are in from him a little bit later. So not a sighting that we can get to. However, Sean did tell me that there were tracks for the Nkuhumas coming out, looked like they were going to come out of Simbabili. I'm going to head across in that direction. We are right on that western boundary with Elephant Plains, so we were right about the general area as to where they were, just out of our reach. Extensively about the various lion dynamics and what's happening, and those naughty Birmingham boys who are on the other side of our boundary. And just in terms of the history of this particular coalition, as far as I understand, they come from the Birmingham Reserve or Birmingham Farm, which was close to Tinswalu. Now, it's always a little bit tricky because if you're not working in an area, you have to sort of rely on the reports of other people to give you the background, and sometimes you do get conflicting reports. But to the best of my understanding, they came from an area around Tinswalu, which was named Birmingham, and I'm actually going to go into area names in a moment because there's an interesting story behind that. Before I do, the Birmingham Boys came from the very large Birmingham pride of lions that moved around in that area, so to the north of where we are now, quite far to the north, probably about, I would say, 20 or more kilometers away from where they've now moved down to. And they were, as I mentioned before, chased out of the Birmingham pride, which is a natural process at around 3 years old. And they moved out and south, and they were pushed slowly by the northern Matimba male lions, and then have been ranging ever since, and were seen to kill 3 buffalo in 3 days. I think that was sometime towards the end of last year. And it's only recently that they have really started calling and marking territories and obviously killing cubs and competing for mating opportunities. It is always interesting to think about the naming of the various prides and various animals. So the Birmingham Boys have adopted the name of their pride. That's not always the case, but generally they will be known as the males that move out on their own will keep the name of the pride name that they have, and very often that name will be based on an area. And if you are familiar with the area that we're in at the moment, the Sabi area, as well as towards Hoedspruit and around there, and further to the east, there there are a lot of names that are based off European names. So there's an Essex, there's a Liverpool, there's a Birmingham. They're all farm names, old farm names. And the interesting story behind that, as far as my history goes, and I couldn't give you exact dates because I've never been very good at dates, but during the time of Paul Kruger, while he was ruling over this area, there was a bit of a conflict in terms of where exactly the border with Mozambique was to be delineated, and he needed to get in some land surveyors. And because nobody in South Africa at that time had the knowledge in order to do that, they called in international European land surveyors to come in and start to create the boundaries of the countries. And while they did that, he actually asked them, you know what, won't you just sort out the farm boundaries as well and start producing maps? And the end result of that is the reason that so many of the farms in this area are called things like Liverpool and Essex and Belfast, which is a town. They all have names. They're all named after the land surveyor's original place of habitation. It's an interesting little piece of history there. And it's amazing to think that that piece of history has carried over to the point that we now have male lion coalitions named the Birmingham Boys. Make my way to the north and to the east of Arathusa, to the Simbambili boundary, which is where I'm headed at the moment, to see if maybe we can have a look at how the Nkuhumas are doing. I'm sure you've all been wondering what Brent has been up to out on foot. Of course, many of you will know our other vehicle, Wendy, is down and out for the moment. She is taking a little bit of a break, so Brent is out on foot with Stef. And we're going to go across to him, and I will catch up with you a little bit later.
Good morning, everyone, and welcome on the Sunrise Safari. My name is Brent Smith, and as you can see, I'm far from the vehicle today. We're on a bushwalk. I have Bryan on camera, and we have Stef with us holding the firearm. And the reason I've only got a stick at the moment is because I'm waiting for my licenses to go through, and hopefully all be able to carry firearm and do the walk individually. But obviously, you see us walk a lot without a rifle when we're tracking. And the reason we take a rifle on the bushwalk is because the camera is a large back one, big aerial. We don't think anything bad is going to happen, and we don't ever plan on anything bad happening, but it's really good to just have that extra bit of safety in case we need it. So we are up on a crest between Impala Plain. Oh, sorry guys, my microphone has escaped. Give me a second. Stuck on, there we go. Hopefully you can hear me a bit better now. I just think it got stuck underneath my binocular strap, so you weren't hearing me too well. And so I'm up here because Stef and Scott were in this area last night after dark, and they heard a bunch of hyenas sort of cackling excitingly. Also, there's tracks of a female leopard that leave the road and head into this direction. So we are going to try see if we can find, hopefully, it looks like Shadow and Sindile, or Madiba, they're tracks of both animals. So it's very difficult after the rain in this block. The ground's very hard, but thankfully Stef's and Scott's hearing is quite good. So hopefully they've pinpointed where it is so we can go have a look. But before we do that, It's quite an interesting little thing happening behind me here. And we've got a termite mound, and what's happened is they've built it up, and with the rain we've had, it's got very, very heavy, and they haven't built it so well. So it's leaned to one side, and this section of dirt below me here has fallen off. So this hasn't been done by an animal, it's been done by bad building. And at the moment, we have these incredibly large soldier termites. You can see there's a really big male. You don't want to be bitten by that. Traditionally, they've even been used as stitches to close wounds. If you get them to bite the wound on either side and then close up, it'll actually close the wound. But you can see some of them vibrating. This little vibration, those are small soldiers, sort of sacrificial soldiers that they will feed to whatever comes to try attack first before the big boys come out to defend. And that vibration is communication between them. But also, if you watch, I'm going to blow onto them, and you see how they get very, very aggressive. Okay. We're going to do it again. You ready, Brian? And you can see they suddenly become very hyper and alert when I blow on them, and that's their reaction to carbon dioxide. So, an animal like an aardvark that eats whoops, a lot of them will, as soon as they get that breath, that carbon dioxide of an animal breathing out, they know there's something possibly coming to attack them. So we're not going to annoy them too much further. As you can see, there are no workers busy repairing at the moment. There's only soldiers defending. And they'll probably, as the day goes on, there will be workers who will come and start trying to repair this section of the termite mound to close it off, because obviously this is a weak point and an easy point of access for possible predators. So normally these guys are fungus growing termites, so they've got a farm right down underneath us, and they're farming, and they will only go out at night to collect different vegetable matter to feed the fungus. So during the day they are open to a whole host of other predators such as birds. So that's why we've got all these soldiers here, and hopefully for these termites the workers will come. I'm just going to try something quickly with this blade of grass here, and it is actually quite incredible if you could see the strength of these jaws. Tell me when you're ready, Brian. So if we do this, he doesn't want to bite my grass. There we go. And you can almost see a little sort of how he's grazed the grass there. So incredibly powerful jaws for such a small animal. So we're going to keep moving now along the crest here a little bit and see if we can find, hopefully, Shadow and Madiba. And hopefully on a kill, that's what we're thinking, because the hyenas were making a noise there. And the fact that Madiba was seen yesterday morning lying down to the south of us, the fact that Shadow's gone and collected him, and now we've got both sets of tracks coming into this block. Hopefully she's hoisted, and hopefully those cackles weren't the hyenas stealing the kill, and hopefully they're just waiting under the tree patiently for scraps. So let's get moving, and we're going to talk quite a lot about a lot of different things on this bushwalk today. But for now, we're going to do some serious tracking, or actually serious guesswork, since we can't see any tracks in this. So we're going to guess. So you can stay with us for a little bit longer. We're going to walk quite carefully through here, and while we're on foot, it's a very different experience from the vehicle. And your senses have to be far more focused, and you have to be a little bit more careful. And it's amazing. It's an instinctive response from when we actually used to live out in the savannas. As soon as you start walking through an area with dangerous game, you do heighten your senses quite a lot. So thankfully, Brian trained quite a lot, because he's got ear into is. So he's relying on Stef to be his eyes, because he's got a focus on working. So we're very fortunate to have this trustworthy, trusting cameraman. Let's get going for now. So we're going to be speaking in every little bit of possible gap there is. You can see what I must say, the sunlight out here, and my shoes have very distant this now. There's barely a, and about about 200 pounds, over 200 pounds, about 90 kilograms. And now imagine Shadow is not even 35 grams, half my weight, and her weight is spread over 4 different notches too. So those leopard track nats on this hard soil are going to be these tiny sort of movements of sand like this. So we have to have our eyes very sharp. So we pick our way through these monkey orange or strychnos onto the crest. It's a bit more open and we'll be able to walk more easily and not make as much noise as we walk. So I'll let you join us till we get up to the crest, and then we're going to do some serious tracking. Okay guys, I've got some very good news. We're just going to walk a little bit quickly now. Stef has actually found the track, I'll show you the track quickly, and across any what we track.
Welcome back. And it seems as though all of the lions are moving out away from our area of traverse. And Brent's given you that update on the fact that the Nkuhumas crossed into Buffelshoek. And in light of that, I've decided to stay around Arathusa. I'm still listening to the Game Drive channel because it seems as though there's a possibility that the Birmingham Boys might move back east onto Arathusa. Just listening to their updates quickly. A couple of them are still lying down, but some of them have stood up and look as though they are about to get mobile again. And they'll probably walk for a little bit before it gets too hot. It is already warm enough for me to have taken off my jacket. I think that's probably a record for me in the early mornings. It's great to know that summer is on its way. I'm just looping around the Arathusa Dam to see if I can pick up on any of those leopard tracks that were made by the leopard who was heard calling on the Arathusa Dam camera. It's very, very quiet. Even the general game animals are tucked away in the middle of blocks. And that is one inevitable consequence of the fact that there's been much more rain. So there's a lot of groundwater, so the animals don't have to go moving out into the open to try and get to water to have a drink. It's one of the reasons why it is so very quiet out here. I nearly forgot what Wium spotted and picked up while you were with Brent. So we've got a little show and tell planned, which I almost completely forgot about. Wium spotted this. Move my shadow out of the way. It's 2 vertebrae, looks like probably sort of the middle of the back of an animal. And it's quite a large vertebra. I think probably something like a zebra or a kudu. Very, very difficult to tell. We've got really clear signs. You can actually still see some of the marrow in that vertebra. And then, of course, the gap where the spinal column can move through. We're have some traffic that we just need to move out of the way for. We are on one of the main access roads for the lodge, so I'm just going to shift out of his way. Oh, he's going to find his own way around me. Never mind. Morning. You? Okay, so back to the vertebra now that he's headed off. So we've got all of these fascinating attachment points. You can see the tops there where it's been nibbled. Probably by hyenas, but it could well be lions. They do chomp the ends of bones. And if it was a hyena, I think maybe more of this vertebra would be missing. They obviously have those very powerful adaptations and teeth. You can see all the cool little gaps of the bone cells where they were supplied with blood vessels. And you can see how perfectly picked clean this entire vertebra is. And it's amazing to think, because this is not an old bone. This is still, the fact that they're still attached to each other tells me that it's quite a fresh, probably from about a week or so ago, a fresh kill. And that picked clean state will have been from a combination of the maggots that will have been on top of them, but also the tiny little hooded vultures. You have those small specialized beaks for just getting into those cracks. And they've managed to completely clear it out. And you can see perfectly, because they are connected like that, the range of movement that the vertebrae have. They're nice and stuck together, but it allows for both horizontal, both lateral and longitudinal movement. And that the size of them, as well as the sort of range of motion, is sort of what tells me which part of the back it came from. And I would say it's probably around the mid-spine. Wouldn't be the neck vertebra or the tail vertebra. They're a little bit too big and too stocky. It's always wonderful to stop and appreciate the little signs and things that you find in the bush, and they can tell you so much about the way that the various animals move. So we've seen how those antelope have those incredibly flexible backs that allow them to expand and contract and reach the incredible speeds that they do, as well as the ability to dodge and duck and turn around the obstacles in the bush if they have to run away from something. And one of my favorite things in terms of looking at spinal abilities is to watch Impala when they're showing off, particularly around mating season, but it happens all year round. It's a special brand of showing off known as stotting. And all antelopes do it, but all antelopes do it in a different way. And one of the coolest things is that the Impala do is they do almost like a handstand, and they throw their back legs up and their spines bend or curve all the way around. It almost looks as though they're going to break, because they do look like such fragile, thin things. So really, really amazing adaptations for the life that they have out here. Unfortunately for this particular, whatever it was, might have been a kudu, might have been a zebra, those adaptations weren't enough to save its life. Now, so far I haven't picked up on any leopard tracks around the Arathusa Dam. I'm still going to stay in this area because I want to just hear what updates there are about those Birmingham Boys movements. It does seem as though they might head in our direction. In the meantime, Brent has in fact found signs of leopards, so we're going to head across to him, and I will catch up with you a little bit later.
Welcome back, everyone, and it looks like the track gods are on our side today, and I'm going to get Brian to show you. So this leopard's come across these aardvark excavations, and you can see this now, and you can see how difficult on a nice soft surface like that. I mean, there's a leopard right there, and this leopard's continued right past me here, and Brian just said, you often find that leopard will investigate these excavations because lots of different animals will use an aardvark burrow after it's left. So tog is probably the most common one, and obviously that's quite a nice meal for a leopard. So we can see these going across here. We're just going to hop across to another excavation where the tracks went, and you can see that this leopard, we've only got one track here, but that's not to say the other isn't close by being on the hard ground. And we can see we're going to just cross to this other excavation with something really interesting. We see here we've got the leopard again coming at the front of the excavation. It looks like someone is inside, has tried to block the way and make sure I think it's coming. I'm just going to pop around. You never really want to stand behind the entrance of these holes. There's a whole mess of underground tunnel that the Fark have created here. And after a lot of soft soil, it could collapse the tunnel or go in tunnel. I'm going to hop across here. Ryan, if you come next to me here. Down into tunnel, and after rain, what looks like some blocking, not actually. You can see again the soil becoming very heavy around here, collapsed. There has been movement of an animal here, but it looks very small. Mice, possibly cane rats, something like that. So, cane rats or something like that. So the leopard tracks continue on. So we are going to, and while we're tracking, we're going to cross back to Jamie, and hopefully she gets some more luck with leopard, and the tracking god smile at her.
Welcome back, and from an area with leopard tracks to an area that seems to be devoid of leopard tracks, I'm still on my search for where that sneaky leopard was hiding, and there's a strong possibility that if it was crawling around the dam, it could well have been the Anderson male. It could of course have been Tingana. Now I know that Brent was having a look at a leopard track around an aardvark hole, and I believe that Tingana has quite the reputation for being an aardvark killer. And you do often see that with the various leopards, that they have a prey species that they specialize in. Now the fact that that track was sitting around an aardvark hole for me is always interesting, because I, as many of the regular viewers know, have still not seen an aardvark. It will happen one day. I just seem to have some kind of anti-aardvark curse upon me, that I always seem to just miss them. The one time I could have seen them, I was asleep in the car. But one day it will happen. Of a Dacre bottom disappearing into a rather thick bush. So there is life out here. It's just feeling a little bit camera shy at the moment. Oh, there's another one disappearing off into the distance. everything's feeling like maybe they don't want to be on camera this morning. The one thing that cannot hide away, of course, is the insect life, and I know that you were watching or looking at termites and discussing termites with Brent, and Liz wanted to know if we get fire ants in this area. Now, I believe that you are from Texas, so America, and we don't get the same species of fire ants that you do, that bite and have an incredibly painful burning creates a very painful burning sensation. Got to be careful here because I'm right on the southern boundary and it's not the clearest on Arathusa. There's some life off to the right of me, so let's head in that direction. I'll just finish off. Now, as far as I know, we don't get fire ants. We do have ants that when they bite you, it's a very similar shape and size and color ant, fairly small and light in color, and my goodness me, do those bites burn when you get bitten by them. So something very, very similar, not the species that you get. Just gonna find a nice view. Got some Bboys here. Morning. And how are you today with your mouth full of grass? Also fairly disinterested in showing his face to the camera, but it stopped for a snack from an apple leaf tree, and I'm just going to be quiet so we can listen to the crunching sounds it makes. Hello. I was hoping for a little bit of a clearer sound from the crunching of those leaves, and I'll explain why in a moment. Once he's moved off from that tree, I'm going to go and grab a leaf and we can talk a little bit about the apple leaf tree. Not making as much noise, but that could well be because there has been a little bit of rain. The leaves are just that little bit more moist. Now, buffalo are bulk grazers, yet here we have one browsing on a tree. And I've noticed that in particular with the buffalo in this area at this time of year, they are really, really enjoying supplementing their grass diet with apple leaves in particular. And there's not actually that many animals that consume apple leaves. I have seen in the past a black rhino spend probably about an hour obliterating every small apple leaf in the area, so they definitely like it. But there's a very good reason for this buffalo targeting the apple leaf, and that's of course because at the moment, until those nice green grass shoots come through, which they are doing, they need a little bit of supplementation to their diet, just to make sure they're getting the nutrients that they need. He's tucking into grass now. Done with his apple leaf. Now, Nancy's picked up on the fact that the buffalo has a lump on his back leg. I was distracted by his dietary requirements, so I'm just having a look now. It was well spotted, Nancy. And it's not hugely obvious, so it could well be just one of the sort of benign growths or cysts that they very often get around their legs. Munching away. And what he will do is he will spend a couple of minutes this morning consuming things, and then at some point he's going to lie down and start to ruminate. So bring up balls of cud and chew on them. Help to fully digest and get all the nutrients out. And there you can see the one on the right is having a fairly lazy morning, apart from the oxpeckers, which are bugging him. And I'm going to loop around in that direction via the apple leaf that our buffalo bull was enjoying. Just loop around, get us a slightly better view, and grab a piece of the apple leaf now that he's moved away. And we can chat a little bit about why it is called an apple leaf. Let's see if we can manage this. Store those for use. Let's loop around and get a nice view of our buffalo boys. They all seem to have settled down nicely. Gentlemen. We've got these three gentlemen here demonstrating the 3 phases of buffalo feeding. One is pretty much asleep. The one in the back right is ruminating, so he's sitting and chewing the cud. And the one back left is consuming or feeding to fill the first ruminant stomach. And down he goes. Now the one that was walking around had a very, very slight limp. Nothing too serious, but that was picked up by Claire. It's very, very common to see buffalo bulls with some kind of limp, especially if they've been running, if they've spooked in some way and just ever so slightly twisted an ankle. Especially old boys like these. You can see they're all very mature bulls. Their bosses, so the base of their horns, are very well developed. And beneath those horns are some very tatty looking ears. Currently being plagued by an oxpecker. As that oxpecker tries to pick off the ticks from around the more sensitive skin around the eye and in the ear. See, he's trying to get into the ear but keeps getting swished out. And Rena picked up on how tatty their ears are and was wondering why. And that's a combination of things. It's mostly the fact that they are all fairly old bulls. And ears tend to catch on things like thorns, especially if you're moving at great speed. And even a tiny little nick or an injury in an ear, with an oxpecker wandering around like that, although they can be very, very helpful, they also will peck away at any kind of injury because they do eat blood and mucus. So they will keep the blood, they'll peck at the coagulated blood and keep that wound open. So they can be a little bit unhelpful at times, and one of the effects of that is that the nicks and tears that buffalo get in their ears don't heal up all that quickly. It might even have a little bit of an infection, which then spreads and makes the nick a little bit bigger. And over time, with buffaloes such as this one, who's probably somewhere in the region from 8 to 10 years old, it then starts to create that very tatty appearance of their ears. And of course, if we were interested in IDing individual buffalo, which generally we aren't, you can use the nicks and tears in the ears. And I referred to these older gentlemen as Bboys. And Maggie from Australia, welcome to the Sunrise Safari. You were wondering where that name comes from. And Dugga is the word for mud. I can't remember which local language off the top of my head. But because very, very often the older bulls, the older buffalo bulls will head off on their own. They tend to be quite grumpy as well. And they will spend a lot of time around rivers and around areas where there's plenty of groundwater because the food is slightly softer and easier for them to chew. And they will spend quite a bit of time wallowing in the mud, hence the name Bboys. They're also probably one of the most dangerous animals to encounter on foot because they often spend time tucked away and secluded in various mud wallows, usually in areas that are fairly thick. And if you're moving through those kinds of areas on foot, you have to be very, very careful as to what you're doing. And when I did my walking assessment a while ago, I went to an area in the Timbavati, which I didn't know at all. You know, you get to know an area, you get to know the game paths. And the guy who was doing my assessment, who's a very, very experienced field guide, the only thing that he prompted me on, he let me lead the walk, go wherever I wanted, but whenever I was getting to an area where there was a mud wallow, he'd warn me. He'd say, okay, around the next corner there's a mud wallow. And the reason behind that warning was entirely because these buffalo tend to be there. They very often are caught by surprise, and they tend to respond fairly aggressively and at close range. So it's always important to look out for buffalo bulls hiding in the mud. Luckily, they also come with an early warning system in the form of oxpeckers. There aren't that many sitting about on these Bboys at the moment, but they make a very distinctive zipping sound. And we're always, when we're walking through the bush, we're always on alert for that kind of noise, because it's often an indication that there's something like a rhino or a buffalo in the area. They could, of course, be sitting on a giraffe, but it's a very useful early warning system. And a couple of times while I've been tracking out on foot in the Sabi Sands, since I began working here, the ox pickers have really helped me out in terms of raising or just heightening my sense of alertness around buffalo bulls that I haven't seen. So I've had a couple of those situations. They do have quite a fearsome reputation, quite possibly undeserved, but these Bboys can be very dangerous. Now these gentlemen don't seem to be showing any signs of any movement at the moment, and unfortunately it seems as though the Birmingham Boys have also gone fairly flat on Elephant Plains, so their initial movements towards in our direction don't seem to have come to anything. And now that the sun is a little bit higher, I think they're probably going to settle down for the rest of the day in that area. I think it's time for us to leave these boys to their morning rest and see if we can find anything else in the area. Prey.
Yeah, that goes. They're rising.
Now Wium spotted a bird of prey. Just going to loop around, see if we can get a nice visual of it again. Well done, wildebeest. You've got your eyes on this morning. Something in a tree. Initial assessment looks like a batelier. Let's just have a look. It's definitely a batelier. Try and get a little bit closer so we can get a nice view. done, Wium. Easiest approach. Is this okay for you? We're right in the middle of a monkey orange thicket. Don't want to go too much further just yet and risk scaring it away before we've had a chance to see it. I'm actually rethinking my initial assessment about it being a battalier. I thought it was a juvenile battalier, which does have that distinctive brown and fluffy head. But there is another one with a fluffy head and a slightly longer square tail, and that is what we're looking at the moment. This is a Wahlberg's eagle. Just need him to turn around. I just want to have a look at his legs. Now, we've only just started seeing in the last few weeks the Wahlbergs coming back from Europe. They're a migratory species, but they fly through into our area to breed at this time of year. They have a very distinctive square tail. And the wonderful thing about nesting Wahlbergs is that the mated pairs will very often return to the same nest site every year, which is incredible when you think about the distance that they cover from here all the way to, I think they're all around Europe up to Sweden that they migrate to. And you think about the distance that they cover year in and year out and come all the way back to nest in exactly the same place as they were in the year before. It is quite phenomenal, their migratory and location techniques. And it's a combination of incredible eyesight as well as their senses of magnetic fields around the earth. But it's still something that absolutely blows my mind when I think about it. Now, very stupidly, I took my bird book out of my bag yesterday to double check up on a bird that was outside Inger's, where I'm living at the moment. And I left it on the step, so I don't have my bird book to show you a picture. But the amazing thing about Wahlberg's eagles is that they come in such a great variety of color morphs. So there's a mated pair that's living just outside Inger's that is the most beautiful light, almost white in color, very light gray. And then you get these incredible dark ones, like the individual that we've got in front of us. It really is quite incredible to think of all the different color variations. And that's mainly with Wahlberg's eagles that you have that variety of color morphs, and actually that you see them most commonly. There are a lot of birds of prey that have color morphs, the tawny eagle being a prime example. But the Wahlbergs are really the ones that have the most dramatic differences, and also the ones that you've got quite a high percentage of the different color morphs in the population. So really cool. They all have that distinctive, slightly fluffy crest on their heads, as well as the very square-shaped tail, very upright posture. So really cool birds to look at, and I'm happy to see them coming back. They are one of the earlier migratory species. Still waiting to see or listen for our first cuckoos that will start coming back fairly soon, our European rollers, and of course the woodlands kingfisher, which has the very, very characteristic call, but we've still got to wait a couple of months before those birds start to come back. And the morphs are almost completely random. It's all in the genetics of the bird. So, although you will get, if you do have pale morphs in an area, obviously they're going to breed and increase the likelihood that you will find more pale morphs in that area. So it can be slightly related to location, but generally it's just pure genetic lottery in terms of what color morph they display. And while I've been talking about that, it's actually raised an interesting question in my head, which I'm going to put to you all. And it's a question I don't have an answer to. I'm just thinking about it now. We think a lot about counter shading in terms of coloration. So something being light colored underneath, so that when it's viewed from beneath, it seems to blend into the environment. Sorry, game drive, talking about lions outside of our boundary. So if viewed from underneath, they have to be light colored to blend in, and then if viewed from the top, they need to be slightly darker colored to blend in with the ground. And I'm just thinking of all of the fantastic variations that the various birds of prey actually demonstrate in terms of coloration. Not all of them, a lot of them are pale underneath, but a lot of them have very, very dark chests. And I'm just wondering what would be the most advantageous coloration technique to adopt. Now obviously pale morphs, because they are fewer in number, are a genetic abnormality rather than the norm. But I am just wondering if there's any kind of situation that would favor certain colors over others, because you get such a variety out here for birds of prey that not necessarily fill exactly the same niche, but do adopt very similar techniques. You get those incredible striking black and white colors of the bataliers versus the more, say, cryptic coloration of a brown snake eagle. It's really just more of a question I'm putting to you to think about than anything else. And if you have any comments that you would like to make, you can do so on #SafariLive on Twitter, or you can email through to questions@wildearth.tv. I think I'm going to leave our eagle for now and see what else we can find. We'll leave him our dark version of the Wahlberg's eagle. And make our way out of a monkey orange thicket. We'll find the shortest way back to the road. Doing this, just see the road up ahead. You will have noticed that as I looped around, I chose to drove. That's fantastic English. I chose to drive over certain tree species in favor of certain tree species and to go around others. And it actually brings me to an enormous question that Shamrock has asked, a very, very broad question, but I think a really interesting one that I'd like to discuss. Now, while we were driving through that area, it's very important if you are driving off-road, because you do make an impact, that you pick your tree species very carefully if you do have to drive over them. And there are certain really biologically important ones that you absolutely do not drive over. Things like tambuertes, young boerbeans, apple leaves, anything like that that isn't a common species. Now, in an area like that, you will have seen I flattened quite a few monkey oranges. It is a bush encroachment species, so it is taking over an area almost unnaturally. It's also an incredibly resilient species. So those ones that I've pushed over will be up and about in no time at all, and it won't have done them any serious damage. But Shamrock's question was even broader than that, and it's one that I've often thought about. I've given it quite a great deal of thought, because it's very important, if you're working in an area like this, to approach what you're doing incredibly ethically, or to make sure that you have as minimum an impact on the animals' lives as possible. Now, Shamrock says that there's been an incredible amount of habituation of the animals to people and to vehicles over the past few years, or probably 40 or so years in terms of Sabi Sands history, and was wondering if this has had any kind of impact on their population, any kind of impact on their dynamics in terms of territorial interaction, and if we know anything more about that. And it's a broad question, and I would say the most important thing to remember is that in any kind of conservation situation, unfortunately, it is all about the finances. There has to be enough money to make it worth keeping an area like this safe from, say, farming. And the best way to do that is through tourism. And tourism is an enormous part of South Africa's economical drive. Brings in lots and lots of international finance from around the world. And to have those animals habituated is actually incredibly important for their future survival and the survival of their species. We need people to want to come and see them. But hand in hand with that is ethical practices in terms of what you're doing. And there are a great deal of rules in place as to how you go about that. And for example, you don't spotlight young cubs if they're separated from their mothers. There's an enormous amount of things that you can do to make sure that you don't impact them. If we're watching an animal hunt, we're not going to turn on the vehicle and distract them at the wrong time. And you'll find that we work amongst some incredibly passionate people out here, and they have incredible ethics in terms of how they do it. In terms of population dynamics, it's been a place of refuge and sanctuary, and probably actually increased enormously the populations and brought the numbers up, since this area would have been hunted out almost completely. When the Kruger National Park was established, the idea was basically, at that time, and from a position of ignorance, to exterminate all predators to try and save the general game numbers. Obviously a practice that we have not adopted now, but that was their idea of conservation at that time. Very well-meaning, but you can see how that level of habituation and tourism has actually led to a tremendous increase and now incredible sightings. And it gives us such a chance to understand a little bit better the way that the animals operate and really draw people and create connections with people and draw them into their lives. The thing about human activity and human management of an area is that impacts may only be felt a long time after the event. So the shift in population that might have been caused by the predator extermination projects that happened in the early 1900s as part of a management strategy could still be having some kind of effect on the lion population dynamics, the way that they run their coalitions. We may never even know the answer to that for certain. But a very, very interesting point that was raised by Shamrock. And we're coming into a perfect example of man's encroachment in a way, and not in a negative way, I would say, which is of course the Arathusa airstrip. which is a vital way of drawing tourists in and bringing money into an area to help keep it as part of a conservation experience. Wow, that dam is full. Last time I was here it was empty. Stopping for a moment at what I think is called a buffalo pan. My geography on Arathusa is sometimes a little bit shaky, but this is the first time I've seen it as full as it is, which makes it quite a phenomenal pan in my experience. When I started working here, this was completely dry. It is, however, also completely devoid of any life forms. I was hoping there might be some birdies wandering around the edge, but it doesn't look like it. So we shall continue our search. I do love this open area. There's a little family of warthogs that I first saw on my interview drive here. It lives somewhere around in a termite mound, so we'll keep an eye out for them. But to continue our discussion in terms of the impact that we've had on lion, in particular lion dynamics in this area, Diana was wondering if there is a difference in social structure in terms of for lions that live in different habitats. And absolutely, there's an enormous difference. It's all determined by prey species or prey distribution, the amount of prey that they've got, the level of cover that they've got. Everything has some kind of effect on their social structure. So the desert lions will have much, much bigger territories, much larger home ranges, almost to the point that they could be considered practically nomadic in terms of lacking a home range. Whereas lions here have much, much smaller territories. A lot of bird life here, but I've actually got quite a nice exciting one off to my right. Oh, here they go. Saw African cuckoo, but they've just flown across the airstrip and I can't actually cross here. There's a lot of starlings making a noise as well. But yes, Diana, there will be a tremendous difference in social structure depending on where those lions are from, as well as a difference in coloration. Guys are working very hard at completing this airstrip. Just going to shoot around them. My hat wants to disappear off my head in this open patch. Let's just get away from the wind, the open airstrip. Now apparently the ring on my finger has been causing some conversation. And Anne, Melissa, Billy Joe, if you guys are all wondering what the stone is, it is a garnet. It's a dark garnet. Something that the ring was actually a gift from my mother many years ago. She bought it for me when I helped my little brother out with some piece of homework. I honestly can't remember what it was. I either did a drawing or I checked it out for him or something, and my mom bought it for me on the spur of the moment. And it's become such a habit to keep it on that it's always sort of part of where I am. But anyway, that's what it is. It's a dark garnet. For those of you who are wondering. Now, since we haven't had much luck in the open areas of Arathusa, I've decided that we're going to go and have a look at what's happening in the drainage lines. Maybe we get lucky and spot some leopard tracks. We'll also see if we can find some pretty birds to show you. And as we leave the open area of the Arathusa airstrip, at the top there by the pan, there were some very messy nests in the tree. And Ray, you were wondering what they were, what species of bird inhabits them. And I'm actually going to try and find some more for you. Those nests were made by red-billed buffalo weavers. So one of the few social nesting species that we get in this area. Quite a large bird with a red bill. And they make these incredibly messy nests. And for some reason, there's something about them that they really enjoy picking up thorns and various, I don't know why they decide to make their nests out of the thorniest trees they can find, but they do. And at the camp that I used to work at, there was one in a marula tree, and we'd spent a lot of time clearing the lawn, making sure it was nice and soft and green, that you could walk barefoot on if you wanted to. And during the buffalo weaver nesting season, we learned very fast that that was a terrible idea. And thorns in South Africa, you've got to be careful, even if you're wearing something like flip-flops or slip-slops or sandals, because if they can go through a tire, as happened to me 2 days ago, they can also pop their way through the sole of your shoe. There's a couple of us that fell victim to the buffalo weavers' very poor, in my opinion, nest building techniques. Obviously, it is a good way for them to discourage any kind of unwelcome visitors to their nests. So something like a snake, they might think twice about pushing their way through the thorns. I'll see if I can spot one for you. They have been around and about. They're a little bit more vocal, getting to the point where they want to fix up their nest and breed. I think, though, that those ones up near the pan have been abandoned. I didn't see any life there. Tried to stop for a squirrel, but I think he's going to disappear into the guarri bushes. I last saw young Sindile/Mediba with Wium in this area. I know that he's now somewhere on Djuma, and Brent is off tracking him. It seems to be a very good place, very popular place for the leopards of Arathusa. I mentioned before about ethical off-roading, and this area is a very good example of that. A lot of young tambuti trees. There's actually a couple of tambuti tree thickets. It's the kind of area that you have to be very, very careful in terms of what you do off-road. One of the things that I am looking for as we move through here is to see if I can find a nice weeping boerbean. And I've noticed that a couple of them have started to flower in this area, and they really do have the most striking bright red flowers, really beautiful trees. And the flowers are actually what give the boerbean, the weeping boerbean, its name, because when they do flower they produce so much pollen that it actually drips down to the base of the tree. There must be some hiding somewhere. I saw one, but it was right in the middle of the staff village. I don't think that they would appreciate our intrusion. And there's a definite increase as well in terms of bird noises, which is wonderful to hear. I mentioned earlier that they graded the road down Triple M's boundary, and that's nice and easy to do because it's a big broad-shaped road. But over the next few weeks, if we get rain that continues in the same way that it did the other day, they are going to need to do some serious road packing, both on Djuma and on Arathusa. And I'm just wondering if this is the drainage line I'm thinking of. There's a couple of areas that I've noticed that it looks as though the roads are actually going to be washed away by the next big rains. It's not this section of this road. Somewhere along this road there's a very, very good example of that. It's as though the road is crumbling away. But it's always important before and after big rains to come and do some road maintenance. Something that I've done a fair amount of in the past, rock packing. As though Brent is still hot on the heels of Sindile or Madiba's tracks, and I believe that he wants to give you a little bit of an update as to how his tracking morning is going. So I will send you back across to him and catch up with you a little bit later.
Welcome everyone. We're still out. We are back towards the tracking vehicle. Unfortunately, Shadow and Madiba have probably avoided us. We lost their track about a kilometre from here, and then we heard the alarm call, so we skidded out in that action, but it looked like they were just a little bit, they were just being a little bit pedantic, maybe caught a sniff on the wind. So we're just going to show you something that's quite interesting here. In front of me, and actually seen this on drives before. Seen walk. Dig, and in that case, we saw it dig a hole probably this deep. This one, as you can see from my hand, not as deep. What they do is digging underneath to get hold of bulbs. So on a lot of the grass species, you see these little dots. Here, there's a little that hold. And these hold nutrients, and so obviously the roots are trying to drag water and whatnot. So lots of minerals and nutrients they've gathered here. So very, very interesting. The stem here for, and they are water independent, so they do not need water at all. So this is how they get their water by digging up the little bulbs and these little bulbs and different succulent things that grow under the ground. So not only on the grass, more bushes as well. So really fascinating. So guys, we're going to head back to the vehicle, and we're going to go work a different area a little bit. And what we're going to do a little bit is we're going to probably sit down, find a nice pretty spot, and I'm just going to chat with you a little bit about some experience foot that I've had over the years, and hopefully we're going to have a more here at WildEarth on the safari walks. And I will a little bit about my experiences on foot. But till then, we're going to cross to Jamie, and we'll be with you a little later.
Welcome back, guys. I'm hoping it's going to stick around. It might be a bit tricky. Oh! Flash and a glimpse. Hold on, Wium. Wium brilliantly managed to capture that male batelier just as it zoomed over our heads. You can see that typical rocking motion of its flight. And gone. Apparently everything is feeling a little bit camera shy, but fantastic work there from Wium managing to catch it just as it zoomed overhead. Now, please bear with us in terms of the audio issues with Brent's walk. We're still busy checking out exactly what's happening, sort of working on the various ways of getting the bushwalk up and running and testing out the audio and aiming at fixing all of those audio problems. So we will be sorting that out. Now, our batelier is feeling camera shy, as is pretty much everything else except the Bboys. Yeah, he's headed off. The reason I knew that it was a male in that brief moment is they are one of the few birds that it's quite easy to tell the difference. Half black and half white makes it a male. Mostly white with a thin black strip along the edge makes it a female. And there's something about it, the fact that I know that you can tell the difference between the sexes of bateliers, that makes me obsessed. Even when I'm driving just in my own car in my own way somewhere, I absolutely cannot go past a flying batelier without stopping to determine whether it's a male or a female. Waterbuck is... Oh, stop there. Hello, boy. Please stay exactly where you are. It's rather thick in there. Nope, there he goes. That characteristic white ring around the waterbuck bottom. And this is probably one of the same waterbuck that young Sindile, or Madiba as he is now known, was stalking. couple of days ago, they do tend to stick around in the same area. They're not territorial per se, and they will move in sort of loose bachelor herds and then mixed breeding herds with one big dominant bull. But they will have a sort of core home range that they hang out in, which is, we're very, very close to where we had him stalking the waterbuck the other day. And unfortunately, our waterbuck has decided that he wants to be in the thickest patch possible and has disappeared off. And a really good demonstration as to why, for animals, for antelope species that live in these thick environments, it's actually preferable for the females not to have horns, because they just get in the way and they get caught, whereas you can just rely on your cryptic coloration to disappear and duck off. And the males, of course, need them because they need a way of competing for and showing off to the females. So they keep their horns for reproductive success. Now, we've been talking a lot about the various signs of spring, and Mary Ann, thank you for the compliments on the new hat. I must say I do owe Mr. Henry a thank you for suggesting in the strongest, I use suggesting loosely, he suggested in the strongest possible terms that I purchase one. And we've been talking a little bit about the signs of spring, and you were wondering when the weeping bourbeens are going to start flowering and which flowers we're going to start seeing first. And this is actually the section of road that I think is going to wash away in the next big rains. There's a very good chance. Oh, there's our waterbuck. Also being very camera shy. Now the weeping bourbeens are starting to flower, as well as the dwarf bourbein, which I was introduced to for the first time yesterday. Bye-bye, waterbuck. Into the guari thicket, where unfortunately we cannot follow. Now yes, the bourbeens have started to flower. I did see one, as I mentioned earlier, in the staff village, but unfortunately I don't think it's very polite for us to go in and film where they live without asking first. But we will start to see them more and more, and the weeping bourbeens have the most incredibly vivid, beautiful red flowers. And hopefully we get to see those soon. In terms of the flowers that we are seeing, the knobthorns are one of the first ones to start to flower and get their new leaves. And I have seen a couple of knobthorns flowering already. It's interesting that towards Hoedspruit and the area that I used to work in, which is not that far from here, the knobthorns have already started flowering. So there's a tremendous difference, even with a distance of maybe 100 kilometers in a straight line, probably even less. But those will be the first signs of spring. I know that just before I went on leave with Andrew, as the cameraman, we spotted, or Andrew spotted, the first flowering, oh, what's it called? It's gone out of my head. Tree wisteria. The bright purple flowers, but I haven't seen any of them since. So we are still looking about. Wow, everything is very, very quiet at the moment. Also trying to work together with Brent a little bit, although I haven't yet been in communication. I'm a little bit far away, but I do just want to check. Oh, hello. dogger boys. They seem to be keen for screen time this morning. This is a different pair to the ones that we saw earlier. We're on the other side of the dam now. Also lying down and ruminating. You see that sideways motion of the jaw. I'm just watching the buffalo chew. I was asked a really brilliant question when I was sitting with a buffalo herd a couple of weeks ago about whether or not they chew in one particular direction, which I think was brilliant. I've never thought about it before, and it's one of the wonderful things about interacting with, in the way that we do, with so many different people from all over the world, is that you get to raise points that you might not necessarily have thought about. And so far he seems to be maintaining a steady right to left motion. I haven't seen him switch yet. I'm sure that they do, just in terms of the wear, trying to keep the wear and tear on their teeth fairly constant. But interesting the way that that chewing motion must build up the jaw muscles tremendously. And I know that the couple of times that we've seen the Nkuhumas on a buffalo kill, we've often looked at the fact and remarked upon the fact that the face is one of the first things to be eaten. And looking at it now, that is probably why. They have to have very well developed muscles around the jaw, so there's plenty of nutrition to be found there, especially for the younger lions who don't necessarily have a chance to get in and feed at the main part of the carcass. And speaking about the Nkuhuma pride, I know there are some viewers who've joined us a little bit later this morning and were wondering what kind of update we have from our side. Now, we're still waiting to hear a little bit more information. It seems as though the Nkuhumas were involved in another scuffle with the Birmingham Boys last night. It actually went through, or happened in the garden of one of the guides who works at Simbambili, and he reported it late last night. And they then chased them through. It seems as though the Nkuhumas were chased off Simbambili, briefly cut through Djuma, and then crossed into Buffelshoek area. So they'd moved through sometime last night. We're still not entirely sure as to what kind of impact there was there. As far as we know, there was no death caused in that scuffle. Now, unfortunately, many of you will now know that the Birmingham Boys about 2 nights ago killed the last of the young sub-adults. So a very sad, distressing situation, but at least the Nkuhumas and the Birmingham Boys have gone in different directions. The Nkuhumas have gone north and east, and the Birmingham Boys are currently sitting quite far to the west of us, right in the middle of Elephant Plains. So separated by quite a considerable distance. And hopefully, for the sake of the Nkuhumas, they either keep moving for now, or the Birmingham Boys start to settle down and feel a little bit more established and comfortable in their territory. I'm going to leave these buffalo to their chewing motions. This tells us quite a bit about the area. Now what we have here, in varying degrees of freshness, is a collection of hyena dung, or scat, sorry, not dung, incorrect use of the term, it is scat for carnivores. There you can see that whitish substance. Obviously, for those regular viewers, you will know already, but for any new viewers, it is definitely hyena. It takes on that very characteristic white color that comes from the excessive amount of calcium that they ingest in their diet by being able to crush and consume bones. And what we've got here is a latrine. So part of a territorial clan marking for whichever clan is around in this area. Let me just shifted the car forward a little bit. And I'm actually going to hop out and show you a little bit about another reason why it is definitely hyena dung, because occasionally it's not unheard of for lions, especially if they are consuming kills in breeding season or around the breeding season for the impalas. They will eat they will eat bones, and their scat does sometimes turn white. But this is very definitely hyena, and I'm going to show you why. Now, one thing I really, really don't want to do is pick it up with my hands, because it is very dirty, very full of parasites. So I'm not going to do that, but I'm going to break it apart. Is this one okay, Wium?
Yeah, well.
We find a nice solid stick to do this. Here we go. So if we have a look, if I break this open, which might be a little bit difficult, but there's some broken open here, you can have a look at how fine and crumbly it is. There's barely any hair in here. There's a little bit of hair, but it's mostly just powdery white stuff. You get it there. And the most amazing thing about hyenas is that they have this incredibly potent stomach acid. It's somewhere in the region of maybe 3 times more concentrated than our natural stomach acid. And it basically just dissolves away almost everything that it comes in contact with, including a great deal of the bacteria and parasites, which is why they're not as picky as some of the other carnivores in terms of how fresh the meat needs to be. It makes them brilliantly adapted for their scavenging lifestyle. Now, latrines like this one, which is the name that's given to the regular deposits of hyena scat, are usually put either around a den site, not at the den site, but around a den site, or they're put along the edge of territorial boundaries, and then occasionally in the middle of territories as well. And the more regularly the deposits, and the more scat that you find in the area, the more likely it is that they're actually marking out a clan boundary. We are probably somewhere in the region of 5 to 7 kilometers from the core range of the clan of hyenas that we usually see. So the group with the young cub, the active den sites that we see, those are in that direction, probably about 5 to 7 kilometers away. And although it's not impossible that this is one of their clan boundaries, I think you'll probably find that this is the boundary of another, or the core home range of another hyena clan in this area. And I've yet to hear of any active den sites on Arathusa, but I'm sure that there must be some. Okay, Impala, don't stress. Of Impala also resting and lying down to ruminate. The other thing that's making the animals here a little bit camera shy, and I'm sure you've picked it up already, is that the wind has picked up tremendously. And of course, Wind always tends to make animals a little bit more skittish. They tend to be a bit more vehicle shy as well. But wait. And some of the females are starting to show signs of pregnancy. It's not enormously obvious yet, but there are some definitely round bellies. And over the next few months that gets more and more pronounced and they start to look more and more uncomfortable. And towards the end of their birthing season, you can almost start to see the angles of the legs of the young fetuses. So they do, and you can often see bulges where the hooves are pressing into their mothers. And they're all standing facing into one direction. And the reason that they're doing that is because it is straight into the wind. So they're all taking an opportunity to smell and to listen to what's going on there. And when they do move off, they are going to move off into the direction of the wind. And that's so that any threats that might be in front of them, they might catch wind of it first. Very sensible approach. This ewe in particular doesn't seem too keen to get up and move just yet. Now, impalas are some of my favorite animals to sit and watch just because they are so incredibly beautiful and elegant. And I'm really excited over the next few months towards November, the end of November, beginning of December, to start seeing all of the babies that will be born roughly around the same time. And last year I was on leave for a week, and when I left there was very pregnant ewes, and when I came back there were no pregnant ewes and lots of little babies. So it's one of my favorite times to be around in the bush. However, I'm sure that you've been wondering what Brent's been up to while you've been with me, and I want to carry on my search for any signs of leopard tracks in this area. So we're going to cut across to him, and I'll be back with you a little bit later.
Well, welcome back everyone. As you can see, backpacks off. We're sitting under a nice big tree that is just panned down over one of my favorite trees out here. It's called the brown ivory bird plum. And it's going to be amazing to watch the transformation in this tree as we come through into the summer months. And I won't be sitting in the sun in a while. There'll be a lush green thicket of me. And it's got really tasty little yellow fruit that the birds are very fond of, hence the name bird plum, but as well as a lot of the other animals, including human beings. And in Zambia, they make quite a mean alcoholic beverage out of it, but we won't be doing that. I think we'll be leaving most of the fruit, apart from the odd one we taste, to the animals out here. So, as I said, we're just going to chat a little bit about walking safaris and bush walks, and I'll share some of my experiences over the years with you. And before we do, I'm just going to sort of explain what a bushwalk means to me and how I feel about it. And it's a very different experience from being on a vehicle. I mean, you really get to sort of touch the earth and see incredible, strange little things that you might miss from a vehicle like that. And that is a dead zebra millipede, and it has basically gone completely still now. basically the insides are completely gone, and it's just this exoskeleton that will break up over time, and we'll find these beautiful little white shells, and it'll lose all the color that's in it. But being on a walking safari is a very different experience. You do have to have senses about you, and I've been very fortunate. I think not proper walking, but my first sort of walk to a big wild animal is also one of my first memories from childhood. I was about 2 years old, and my parents and friends having a stop next to a big pan in northern Ghana, and I disappeared, and my dad suddenly saw me about 5 to 10 meters away from a big elephant to it. To get me out of that situation, give me a hiding, I think more out of fright that his eldest son might be stomped on by a big bull elephant. But for me, that's the first sort of memory, and in the bush, and one of my first memories of my life, and that was on foot. So a very, very special memory. And over the years, I've spent a lot of time on foot as a family, even with animals. And I think the time we started walking into things like elephant, rhino, and lion regularly was from about 6 years old. My dad would take us walking into these animals that are particularly dangerous, but unfortunately my dad's got a lot of experience, and a bit of that's rubbed off on me. And so far, no major or bad experiences on foot. And then I was very fortunate, apart from all the walking I did, the tracking here in the sands and in Botswana, probably one of the most interesting walking careers in my life, it was definitely a career, is we took over a hunting concession in southern Tanzania, and we converted it into a walking safari concession. So incredible experience. I mean, an almost virgin area. It was 150,000 hectares, and we only ever had 6 people. So 150,000 hectares, double the size of the whole sea sands, and it was just us there. What we did is we took the concept big game hunting safari, and we converted it. So instead of hunting the animals and shooting them as you would do on a hunting safari, we did exactly what they would do, except with cameras. So we would walk up to an elephant or a lion, get as close as comfortable, that the same sort of distance as they would do on a hunting safari, and then instead of firing a bullet, we would fire many photographs. And we had some incredible experiences there. A very beautiful part of the world, and incredible to walk. Had these dry big riverbeds, I mean riverbeds that were 2 kilometers wide in the dry season, the tiny trickle of water, and wild dogs coursing up and down them, and incredible elephants. That area also went up to over 1,000 meters above sea level, so we had remnant rainforests and colobus monkeys, and it was an absolute privilege to work in that area. And probably one of the most fun walking trips there was actually only had one game, and a very good friend of mine who had done quite a bit of work for National Geographic as a photographer by the name of Rob Ross. And he spent 3 months on, and he's actually doing a book on the salute to be out in a while, but it's taken 5 years to put that together. And he's 3 months with me while I was doing anti-poaching and building road and opening that concept. And lions in that area, because they'd been shot at so much, they used to run from the sight of cars. And it took us about 7 months to get them relaxed to the vehicles. So often the best lion sightings we had were on foot. And probably my favorite is we were walking in this beautiful Dambo. Dambo is an open sort of grassland in the woodland, and we came across fresh lion tracks. And I had my tracker in Mboro, and my other tracker Kumbi. Kumbi is a Maasai, and Mboro was near that area. And off we went on these tracks. So just the 4 of us, and we followed them for about 3 kilometers till we actually found where they killed a warthog. And they dragged this warthog down into the drainage line. And we managed to find them, and it was just so fortuitous. We happened to find this incredible path. And what we did is I got Rob, I said, listen, these lions, they're skittish. The only way we're going to get there and get those photographs is if we take off our shoes. So that's exactly what we did. We took off our shoes. There were a few thorns, but you can move so much quietly. Snuck through this thicket, and there was lots of dried leaves. That's why we took our shoes. It was a Tamboti thicket, and we got to a spot we were about 15 meters from the carcass. The lions were busy feeding. They didn't know we were there. And we stopped behind this piggy, probably double the size of this one. And my two trackers behind me, and Rob putting his camera on the one side, and myself putting the camera on the other. And we managed to get some fantastic photographs of the I actually ended up spending a lot of time with in the end in my time in Tanzania. And it was just incredible that they didn't know we were there. And while we were sitting there, and of course I was carrying my rifle at that stage and was registered to carry firearms in Tanzania. And while we were sitting there, two kids sitting directly behind us. And what happened is suddenly my tracker in the board, my side tracker was having a snooze. So he's like, they've seen the lions now, they're taking photos, it's fine. So he was having a little snooze, put his head against the tree. And Nkuhumas, fortunately, was awake. And suddenly he goes, "Bwana, bwana." And the lions on the kill lift their head. I lift my head. And my rifle was leaning against my leg. And I turned slowly around. And like 8-9 meters behind us, she wasn't stalking us, but it was one of the lionesses that left to go have a drink, was just watching. And I remember Rob, who's America, sort of had spent a lot of time in the bush, but not that much time on foot with big. He looked at me and his eyes sort of open. I was like, no, it's fine. We're just going to stay. And all I did is I slowly stood up. And she went, "Oh," and she ran away. So a happy ending to that. But very, very important. And that shows you how conscious you have to be. I mean, we had 3 incredibly experienced people on foot in the bush, and a lioness still managed to come up behind us. But one of my favorite walking experiences that I've ever had. Another, also with Rob in southern Tanzania, and also with lions. And I have lots of stories which I will share with you over the time, but I think we'll just stick to the cats for today. Was also with lions, and we were walking up to this buffalo, about 450 buffalo, and they saw us and they stampeded off up this very steep hill. And so we decided to go follow them, see if we could get a few more photographs. And while we were walking, probably about 100 meters behind these buffalo, and we just heard this, which is basically Brian's looking around worried that I might have called the lions to come galloping in towards us. But basically it was a young buffalo calf that had been grabbed by these lions. So we jogged, and we actually managed to see the lions pulling the buffalo calf away from a herd of buffalo that were trying to chase them. This was all on foot, so absolutely incredible. It is, I've only seen 3 kills on foot, and I think that was definitely the most exciting. Because the buffalo were chasing it, dragged this poor baby buffalo into this really, really steep ravine. And because we had sort of free reign in this area, the lions then spotted us, and they'd killed the buffalo, and unfortunately, so remember, I said that basically we were focused on being sort of like old school hunting safaris, but with cameras. So a lot of which is not people hunt things that will find a kill, and they will build a blind and sit there. So we did with trackers, we went and built a grass blind completely around us, about 20 meters from these lion kill. We went there and we sat there for 6 hours. Those lions came and started feeding, and we got some photographs. And that very, very scared me. Even in all my years there and the habituation we did with them, we could never really habituate them. They did sort of live on the peripheries of our conversation. So it's just a few stories. I hope you guys enjoyed them, and it is so wonderful to be on foot again. It is really one of my most favorite things in the world. Thanks very much for joining us on this bushwalk. Sorry about the signal breakups and audio breakups. We are trying our best to get those sorted as soon as possible, but I definitely do look forward to spending a lot more time foot with all you guys. So we're going to cross to toJamie. Last the show. Oh no, she disappeared. I noticed her, but she was watching us, and she didn't realize we were sitting from my side. And the brown ivory tree. Have a full morning, or wherever you might be in the world, and we will see you on the Sunset Safari.
just shifting out of the way for one of the other vehicles to come past. Morning, morning. Hi guys, good on you. Lutu.
Lutu this one, yeah.
Yeah.
You from the west?
Yeah, I came from the west.
An update in other areas?
Yeah, not that I heard. Birmingham Boys on Elephant Plains.
Yeah.
That was it.
They'll come through though to you.
Yeah, it sounds like it.
Yeah,
Maybe this afternoon.
yeah,
Get lucky.
definitely.
Alright, cheers guys.
Yeah.
Bye-bye. Just chatting to one of the Simbambili guides. And I'm sure we will be hearing plenty from them as to, he also thinks that the Birmingham Boys are going to move to further east, back into Arathusa, which is great news for this afternoon's sunset safari. Now it seems as though Brent has been telling some epic tales of his childhood spent in the bush, and I was almost attracted by the sound of what I thought was a dying buffalo until I realized that it was Brent in the middle of what sounded like quite an entertaining story. And there's always something incredibly special about being on foot in the bush, especially when you are responsible for showing people and experiencing things on foot with other people, and having guests behind you creates a whole different experience. And what's always fascinating for me is to actually watch how people's perceptions change. The way that we used to operate, we'd always start off with an introduction, couple of drives, and then do a couple of walks as well with our volunteers and with our researchers. And to see their perception and their understanding of their environment change after they've done walks is truly fantastic to see. And there is something that you get that is special on foot that you can't necessarily get from the back of a vehicle. You really get to experience the sounds and the smells, and you find that even as human beings with our rather weak senses, you do get a sort of an extra boost in your hearing and your sense of smell. And just as a sort of vague example, that other day when I was tracking the D-band, he was following behind and playing a little bit with me. There was something that I must have picked up, and it must have been a sense of hearing that I didn't even register as hearing, that made me turn around and look behind me when he was following me. And I think that we do have more senses than we necessarily give ourselves credit for. I spotted something in the air. Oh, is it just a small plane coming through to land at one of the airstrips. I was just kind of hoping it was an enormous bird of prey when I first saw it, but it definitely wasn't. Plane probably carrying a new group of safari guests to come and enjoy this beautiful area. And the best part of walking, or one of the best ways to have a real walking experience, in my opinion, is to do it in a way that the animal never even knows that you're there. And it was one of my favorite things to do. I used to spend probably half of my walking hours, if not more, were spent tracking rhino and looking for them as part of an effort in terms of anti-poaching. We'd find them and make sure that they were safe and keep track of all of the individuals throughout the reserve that I used to work on. And rhino are particularly wonderful to walk because you can sneak up to them if you're very careful. I've had some wonderful experiences, and probably the most special time for me in terms of any walking experience I've ever had was just after we had lost a couple of rhinos to rhino poaching, and we stopped and there was a new calf that had just been born, so a really nice new start, a new hope for us all. And we sat probably about 20 meters away from the mother. She didn't know we were there, with all of the guests sitting behind us. And we sat and we watched the new calf suckle for close to 20 minutes. And that to date has probably been my favorite walking experience with other people involved. just because it was such a special moment for all of us. And even the bird life has been fairly shy on this windy Sabi Sands morning. But we do have a nice hornbill, or two hornbills here, that are at least giving us a nice view of those striking colours. Definitely one of the most entertaining creatures to watch. They always have a slightly manic expression. Now, it really is exciting for all of us that we're starting to get these walking safaris up and running. And between all of the presenters, we all have the most amazing stories to share. And we started with Brent's incredible stories about his background and his upbringing and him wandering up to an elephant as a child. So we're going to have some exciting times ahead, and we're still going to be working on the various technical issues and the sound issues. But I know that we're all very keen to head out on foot and see what we can find, and hopefully add that extra element that being out on a vehicle doesn't necessarily give you. It's a really fully immersive experience, and it puts you down at the level of the animal, and you can start to really understand things from their angle and their perspective. So very, very exciting for all of us. Now, it has been very quiet out here. The Birmingham Boys are flat cat on Elephant Plains. We will be starting our sunset safari on Arathusa in the hope that they are going to move east. But in the meantime, we're going to say farewell, and a big thank you to Wium for his fantastic camera work as always, and to Tara and to Lou in FC, and to you, all of the viewers. We will see you for the sunset safari.